Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into one of the most intense, totally contradictory, and honestly, fascinating periods in modern history. We're going to take a deep dive into the absolute most radical phase of the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror. And of course, we'll be looking closely at the man who basically became its architect, Maximilien Robespierre. We're going to explore exactly how a passionate pursuit of liberty and equality somehow transformed into an era of unprecedented state control.
So let's dive right into this paradox. How exactly does a movement built on the absolute highest democratic ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity, how does that escalate into a systemic bloodbath? Because between September 1793 and July 1794, the French Revolution took a really dark turn. Revolutionary leaders started using incredibly harsh measures, up to and including mass executions, just to eliminate absolutely anyone they thought threatened their brand new republic. But to understand how they got there, we have to look at the pressure cooker that was France at the time.
Part 1. The Republic in Crisis. To really grasp the terror, we first have to examine the existential threats facing France that made these extreme measures seem, well, necessary. Imagine facing four massive, crushing crises all at the exact same time. First off, France is fighting huge external wars with European heavyweights. We're talking Austria, Prussia, and Britain. Meanwhile, internally, royalists are actively plotting to bring the monarchy back. Third, you've got massive counter-revolutionary revolts breaking out in regions like the Vendée. And on top of all that, everyday citizens are suffering from extreme food shortages and crippling inflation. The crucial point here is that revolutionary leaders were absolutely terrified. They genuinely believed the revolution was going to just collapse under all this pressure. So in April 1793, they make a drastic move. They grant extraordinary, practically unchecked powers to a new body called the Committee of Public Safety, basically telling them to protect the revolution at all costs. Which brings us to part 2, Enter the Incorruptible. Let's introduce the man who would eventually dominate this all-powerful committee. Meet Maximilien Robespierre. Born in 1758, he was a lawyer and a highly influential member of a radical political group known as the Jacobins. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer contrast between his reputation and his legacy. He was actually famously nicknamed the Incorruptible. And that wasn't a joke. He earned it for his absolute honesty and his unyielding dedication to his principles. Yet, this highly principled guy would eventually become completely synonymous with state terror. To understand how that happened, you have to understand his mindset. Robespierre firmly believed the monarchy had to be entirely abolished to create a republic based strictly on equality. But to achieve that pristine republic, he thought corrupt officials and literally any enemies of the revolution simply had to be eliminated. The stakes were so incredibly high in his mind that using terror wasn't just an option. It was totally justified to protect the revolution from anyone trying to destroy it. Just listen to how he justified it. Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, and inflexible. Wow. It's a chilling statement, but it perfectly captures how he viewed his own actions. He wasn't trying to be a villain. He was operating from a place of absolute, inflexible righteousness. To Robespierre, terror wasn't evil. It was a necessary, righteous tool, the purest form of justice, used to keep the republic safe. Part 3, the machinery of terror. Let's transition into how this intense ideology was actually structurally implemented into a fast-moving machine of state control. This whole thing escalated breathtakingly fast. April 1793, the Committee of Public Safety is formed. By September 1793, they passed the Law of Suspects. And this is a massive turning point because it allowed authorities to arrest literally anyone simply suspected of opposing the revolution. No hard evidence required. That very same month, revolutionary tribunals start holding trials for these suspects. But the trials became incredibly brief, totally stripping away any real chance for a fair defense. The machinery was now fully turned on. And the main gear in this machine? The guillotine. It became the ultimate, inescapable symbol of the terror. And it did not discriminate. Victims ranged from the very top of the social ladder, like Queen Marie Antoinette, who was executed for treason in October 1793, all the way down to nobles, priests, and former royal officials. But it also swept up political rivals and countless ordinary, everyday citizens who were just accused of being disloyal. 17,000. Just let that number sink in. That is the staggering official count of people executed by the guillotine during this period. But that number only tells a fraction of the story. Tens of thousands more died just rotting in poorly kept prisons or were killed in the civil conflicts tearing the country apart. The scale of the violence was just unbelievable.
Moving into part 4, the Great Terror begins. Let's look at how, in 1794, the paranoia peaked and Robespierre started turning on his own allies.
In a really desperate bid for absolute control, Robespierre actually starts turning the tribunals on his own people. He orders the execution of radical revolutionaries who thought he wasn't being harsh enough, and he executed moderate revolutionaries who just wanted the terror to end. By eliminating anyone who wanted harsher or softer policies, he deeply alienated his remaining allies. Then, in June 1794, the Law of 22 Periel is passed. This devastating law made convictions even easier, further limited defendants' rights, and caused a massive, terrifying spike in executions. This extreme escalation is what historians call the Great Terror.
But here's where it gets kind of surreal. At the exact same time he's escalating these executions, Robespierre throws a massive public celebration. In June 1794, he promotes a brand new civic religion, the cult of the Supreme Being, complete with this grand festival. For many of his fellow revolutionaries, watching Robespierre put himself at the center of a grand religious spectacle was the last straw. It genuinely made them fear he was acting like an absolute dictator. Part 5, the fall of Robespierre. Here is how that escalating fear among his peers finally sparked his rapid downfall. His collapse was extraordinarily swift. On July 27, 1794, his opponents in the government finally make their move and arrest him. His supporters actually attempt a rescue, but it completely fails. He's swiftly captured, given a brief trial, ironically much like the ones he championed, and on the very next day, July 28th, Maximilien Robespierre is executed by the guillotine. The architect of the terror literally fell victim to the exact machine he built, effectively bringing the reign of terror to an end. Part 6, Legacy of the Terror. Let's look at the objective, historical consensus of this radical period. The terror left an incredibly complex legacy. On one hand, you could argue the extreme measures actually worked in the short term. The government successfully defeated foreign invasions, they suppressed the internal rebellions, and they kept the revolutionary state from completely collapsing. But the cost was absolutely staggering. You had traumatizing, widespread fear, civil liberties were utterly destroyed, and thousands upon thousands of innocent lives were lost. The government survived, for sure, but at the devastating cost of public trust and human life. The immediate shift after all this is known is the Thermidorian reaction. Basically, public opinion had definitively turned against Robespierre and extreme radicalism. The country demanded a massive step back from the brink, leading to a much more moderate phase of the French Revolution, where that whole machinery of terror was finally dismantled. Which leaves us with this final, really echoing thought. The story of Robespierre and the Reign of Terror isn't just about 18th century France, It highlights the timeless, fragile balance of democratic ideals. When a state faces a true existential threat, where exactly is the line between necessary security and the total destruction of civil liberty? It's a question the French Revolution paid for in blood to try and answer. And honestly, it's one that remains just as vital today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.